We all like stories. When Jesus was a little boy, there were no storybooks for children. Most ordinary people couldn't read, so storytelling was very important. Jewish mums and dads would tell their children the stories passed down by their grandfathers since God first made the world. Jesus told lots of stories to anyone who would listen. He used his stories to teach people important things. Sometimes he was even called the teacher. He became famous for his storytelling, and people used to flock to hear him. It worried Jesus that people might go away without really understanding what he was telling them. So he usually took the trouble to explain the meaning of the stories. Let's open the book at A Tale of Two Houses. See if you can work out what Jesus is really saying here.
Two men decided to build a house, one each. They looked around God's beautiful land to find the best spot. The houses needed to be near water and fertile ground so that the men and their families could grow crops and vegetables and graze their cattle and sheep. Both men thought it would also be good to have a really beautiful view so that when the day's work was done, they could sit outside, relaxing with their wives and enjoy all that God had provided for them. The men, one called Fareed and one called Simeon, each set off to find the right spot to build his house. Fareed quickly found what he was looking for, a good view near the water, and collected his tools and set to work. Simeon poked and prodded and hummed and hawed, but he too found a place he thought was just perfect for a house. So they set to work. Fareed worked quickly and had the walls half up before Simeon had made his first clay brick. All Simeon had done was to dig a big, shallow pit. "Get a wiggle on, mate," said Fareed as summer approached. "At this rate, your roof won't be on by autumn." Simeon said nothing. He stared at Fareed's house and went back to work on his pit. As he worked, he prayed, "Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always." "Get a wiggle on, mate," said Fareed as autumn approached. "My roof's nearly finished. Your wall's only a metre high. You'll never be ready when the cold strikes." Simeon said nothing. He stared at Fareed's house and went back to work on his wall. As he worked, he prayed, "Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always." "Get a wiggle on, mate," said Fareed as winter approached. "Bit late for roofing now. My house is finished and we're moving in tomorrow. Snug as a bug in a rug. You'll never be ready for winter." Simeon said nothing. He stared at Fareed's house and went back to work on his roof. As he worked, he prayed, "Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always." Simeon finished his house just before the winter storm started. Torrential rains began and the winds blew, and soon the river rose. On and on it went for days and days. Simeon was glad he had taken such care with the foundations of his house, he made sure he found a flat piece of land with a good rocky base. He made his clay bricks and built slowly and carefully, making sure everything was watertight. He had trusted in God to show him the best way, both to build his house and to live his life. Simeon peered out of his small window just in time to see Fareed's house give its first wobble. The ground it was built on seemed to be disappearing into the river. He stared at Fareed's house as it swayed and lurched and then fell to pieces with a loud crash. And all that was left of it was a heap of mush on the sliding sand near the riverbank. Sensible Simeon was like the people who listened to Jesus and built their lives on what he told them. And foolish Fareed was like those who didn't.
So, did you manage to work out the meaning of the story? Sensible Simeon was like a person who listens to the wise words of Jesus and trusts them. That person builds a good, strong life for themselves, just like the good, strong house. Let's close our eyes. If building a good life means listening to wise words, whose words are we going to listen to and whose words will we ignore? I'm going to say a prayer, and if you'd like to make it your prayer, you can say Amen at the end. Dear God, help us to listen to those who have wise words to share and help us to ignore silly ideas. Amen.